us through the morning's top news about the phone hacking scandal. We're joined by former News of the World journalist and whistleblower Paul McMullin and Anne Diamond, who was a victim of press intrusion herself. Hi there, thank you for coming in. Now, Paul, you were at the News of the World from '94 to 2001, and then you were freelance till 2006 as an investigative journalist. So, just how far did you go to get a story?
Well, I suppose in the public interest, I use that defence, I would stop at nothing if there was a story to get. You know, there was so much pressure from the editors shouting at you and other people looking to take your job from you. If you didn't get it, then you would, you know, go to the nth degree.
Illegal? The nth illegal length?
Well, I've always said that if you're exposing a, you know, corrupt politician who's cheating on his wife or, you know, stealing expenses, you're perfectly justified to hack into his phone or look at his bank account to see what's going on. And most of the public are with you with that. And also most of the public are with you when you hack into Hugh Grant's phone because he earns £5 million a picture and he's just a superstar bleating on about his mobile.
But that's no
right to privacy. No right to privacy?
That's still
well, he's
illegal,
highly publicist, so he wants to be a public figure. But this completely changes everything. And it's brought an emotional element into it that I, as a father myself, just can't imagine what the parents of Millie Dowler must have thought when her phone suddenly came alive again. I mean, that's too terrible to defend. And while, you know, freedom of the press and keeping our politicians in check is a good thing, you know, you've got to say under the management of Andy Coulson and Rebekah Brooks, it just was getting out of hand. And
two important questions then. So, did you personally hack into somebody's telephone?
I've got a lawyer telling me that if I say that now, I've been asked into Scotland Yard already, and if I say that now, they can arrest me for doing that.
Only if you've done it?
Indeed. So clearly that would be incriminating myself and have to be completely daft to do that. But got to say,
you've just said it's that if it was for celebrities and politicians, it was all right.
Well, OK, so yes, I would say...
So you've hacked into celebrities' telephones?
Are we supposed to be going down this line?
Well, the crime is the same, whether it's Millie Dowler's telephone or whether it's a celebrity's.
You were there, you were in the very heart of it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, when I was promoted from reporter to deputy features editor, the first thing I did was to ring up the PIs that we were paying a ludicrous amount of money to, between £2,000–4,000 a week, to do these things, and I demanded to listen to their tapes.
Was this approved of by a higher level, though?
Yeah, sure, yeah. No.
So who signed it off? That sort of payment, it's a lot of money.
Well, I mean, Rebekah Brooks was features editor.
So she signed it off?
Yeah, clearly. Well, that's one of the things that I've been so disappointed about, in that I have said, OK, we did all these things, you know, for the greater good, just to write truthful and well-researched articles and, you know, catching people who are very difficult to catch. Yeah. You expect your boss to stick up for you, not to say, oh, we knew nothing about it. Oh, it's all that reporter over there.
Let's pick the bits out of this then. So Goodman was jailed for 4 months, Mulcair for 6, after they admitted intercepting messages on Royal Aid's phones. That was in January 26, 2007. The Press Complaints Commission says it was satisfied after its investigation that no one else at the News of the World knew of tapping. So that's 2 people. Nobody else at the News of the World knew about the tapping.
Well, everybody knew. It was gossip talk. I mean, I remember walking outside talking to a paparazzi and he was making a joke, you know, who have you hacked today? It was common knowledge. It was an overused technique, and
so I'm going to ask you again. So you have tapped into celebrities' phones as part of a culture at that newspaper and possibly other newspapers of acceptance.
Well, I mean, under my watch, if you like, that certainly happened. And
was the editor of the newspaper aware that that was happening at the time?
Yeah, apparently Andy Coulson was sobbing into his beer last night that he was going to jail, and he might very well do that, and it's not impossible that Rebekah Brooks might follow him.
Well, they always say when something like this happens, it's the deputy head that rolls.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
And in this case, that was Andy Coulson, I suppose.
Well, let's not forget that there has been a statement from the boss himself. Murdoch said recent allegations of phone hacking and making payments to police with respect to the News of the World are deplorable and unacceptable. They're going to carry on their investigations under Rebekah Brooks's leadership, who, of course, is chief executive. So would the boss have known that it was going on?
Yeah, funnily enough, I was asked that by Australian BC, and everyone wants to know, but I've got to say, I don't think Murdoch really would have known. He stood well back. In fact, that's possibly the whole problem, that he was getting on a bit and he'd moved over, you know, to Asia and America, and it was his son James in charge, and who was quite young. And he employed people who were really young and inexperienced. I mean, you look at Rebekah Brooks, what actually had she done? I mean, when I employed people, I insisted that they'd done 2.5 years on a local newspaper. But, I mean, what had she done?
Inexperience is no excuse for breaking the law. What about paying the police for stories? Did you ever pay the police?
Stories that I worked on came from policemen who'd been paid for the information.
And again, there must have been a budget for that.
There was. Well, I think we had the biggest budget in...
So there must be signed chits somewhere where somebody like Andy Coulson or Rebekah Brooks has signed off the payment of police. They must exist somewhere, mustn't they?
Yeah, it would go a little bit higher than that because it came out of the safe in another editor's office.
So hang on a second. So there was a safe in someone else's office that was used to pay
cash
the police?
Or
yeah, I mean, all I will say is the most amount of cash I ever paid for a story was 30,000 quid in 2 carrier bags.
To who? Police?
No, I don't have to go into that, but that's the kind of level of money that you
Can you
might
tell us what the
pay.
story was?
No, I mean, that doesn't really matter either.
Did it involve a celebrity, or was it a victim of a...
Well, no, it was a celebrity, because, you know, a story that makes page 35, 1 paragraph, is worth nothing, but on the front
that
page
source
it's
could well
worth
have been a
very
policeman.
Well, no, but again, there were very good sources, particularly around the time when Diana was alive, that would tell us where she was going, which country she was going to, who she was arriving with, who her new boyfriend was. And these people were, you know, were they military, were they police? We're not quite sure who the close protection who were looking after Diana was. Some of it was freelance, some of it wasn't. And those tips were worth lots and lots of money, and that's a big carrot to dangle in front of someone's face.
Is there a list of people that you go to for these? Is there a list of people within the police that you knew that you could pay off?
No, it's a much longer relationship that takes a while to develop. I mean, no...
Well, it's a perfectly legitimate question. Is it a long list of established contacts that you had?
Well, it's not a very long list, actually. It's
so some people were on the take. Some high-up people were on the take over a long period of time.
I think even Rebekah admitted that. I mean, that's, you know, reasonably well established.
We've actually got a clip of the hearing. Here we go.
Can I not just ask whether they ever pay the police?
Sorry?
It's just the one element of whether you ever pay the police for information.
Yeah.
We have paid the police for information in the past. It's been...
And will you do it in the future?
We
operate within the code and within the law, and if there's a clear public interest, then the same holds for private detectives, for subterfuge, for video bags, whatever you want to talk about.
It's illegal for police officers to receive payments.
No, we don't. As I said, within the law.
Yes, there is no within the law. If you pay a policeman, it's a bribe.
I think the exact law was started in 1901, where it became illegal to pay a police officer. But I will say that if a police officer does come to you, and this is a guardian of the law, and says it's OK to pay me, and I will be able to whistleblow about corruption even within the police, maybe holding that big cash bag up as a carrot may uncover something that really is in the public interest, and so it's not such a bad thing, and it's not really corruption. It's, I mean, it's just a carrot to weed out people who will fall for that, and shed some light and some truth into...
This is all... We're all talking about something that allegedly happened some time ago, so 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
What about now? Now, up until the fact that this hit the newspapers, I would have thought there's an awful lot of people jumping back away from their desks and getting shot at bits of paper. If that is the case, was it happening 3, 4, 5 weeks ago?
It's changing. Technology is changing. And, because there's always going to be money there, there's always going to be freelancers, there's going to be paparazzi who are going to be prepared to put a little tracking device under someone's car, your car possibly. There's going to be people who are clever enough to know how to... apparently there's an app you can stick on a phone that when you text, it will go to that paparazzi's text so he can read it. I mean, Hugh Grant said, how come they can read my texts? Every time I send one, there's someone waiting for me round the corner. So as technology develops, you know, the people who want to make, you know, 10 grand plus by selling a story are going to develop with that.
Let me finally ask you this, both of you. Front page of the Independent today, Murdoch Empire in crisis. Is this a crisis for News International? Does it extend beyond the News of the World to Sky?
I think it does. I think it absolutely does, because what we're doing at the moment, and what the Culture Committee is meant to be doing at the moment, is asking whether the Murdoch organisation is fit and proper to be running so much of British media, let alone taking over completely Be Sky B. And now we're thinking, well, hang on a minute, the News of the World is their biggest title, makes them something like 40 million a year. It's the biggest read newspaper on the planet, I'm told, and it could well be corrupt at its core. And whose fault is that? Rebekah Brooks may well say it's inconceivable that it's her fault, but hang on a minute, if it's not her fault, then it should be her fault, because if you're not responsible, you should be responsible in her sort of position, and possibly Rupert Murdoch as well. So I think we do have to look to the takeover of Be Sky B and think, no, this is no longer enough. Murdoch is responsible for 40% of our media, and if he and his people have encouraged a culture within the media that allows this sort of thing to happen and go on, then we really need to ask questions about whether he should have any more.
They're being penalised already. A lot of advertisers have pulled out, haven't they? They've lost a lot.
Yeah, they've lost the Royal British Legion, I hear, in the last couple of hours, which really says a lot, because until now, The Sun and the News of the World have been very, very proud of their pro-military stance, you know, backing our boys in Afghanistan. And I think a lot of the good journalists who do operate on that paper will be really seriously hurt by what the bad guys have allowed to happen.
I mean, there is a lot of good journalism at the News of the World. I did some really credit-worthy things. I mean, I did the naming and shaming of the paedophiles in Britain, and I think when we publish pictures of paedophiles, say this guy is on the run, maybe we saved a child's life here and there. I mean, all we were trying to do was to write, you know, decent, honest, truthful articles about things, and OK, sometimes we did stray into that grey area.
Straying into the grey area is deleting messages on Millie Dowler's telephone.
That was unforgivable. That was a freelance who was not staff at News of the World, who got a bit carried away with it.
Hacking into the victims of 7/7.
Are you aware of other occasions when things like that have gone on?
Well, yeah, I mean, people talk to me all the time, but specifically, the problem is, I mean, phone hacking under Andy Coulson's watch almost became the technique of your first technique. Well, let's see what their phone messages is about, and that was just wrong. That was lazy journalism. And when I looked at the reporters and how many times they'd rung PIs to get them to do their jobs for them, it was always the poor ones, the lazy ones, who didn't want to go out of the office and do the legwork themselves.
We have to say, and we would point out right away, that we don't know that as facts, because he's not here and he's not here to defend himself.
Well,
but we assume that because we don't know about it,
but
that the Prime Minister didn't know about it when he hired him.
Ah, well, that's a really good point.
Oh, sorry, if you hire an ex-News of the World editor, you know what you're paying for. None of this is new. Back in the 80s, when I was tabloid fodder, I was advised by a former News of the World editor, Derek Jameson. Do you remember him? He said, never be so naive as to accept flowers from reporters. During the times when I had all my babies, and then when I lost one of my sons, he said, never, never accept flowers, because it's their first way in your front door. And he didn't just mean physically the way they would get in your front door. He meant there would be bugs in those flowers. And I remember being really frightened, having all these flowers here at one point when I think I'd lost my little boy. We were sent lots of lovely flowers by Fleet Street, and my housekeeper said, I'm going to take them round and put them in the church, or put them on the church altar. We mustn't leave them here. They'll have bugs in them.
Did you ever find
and if they're eavesdropping, all they'll hear is Ims.
Did you ever find a bug in any of them?
No, and I wouldn't have known what to look for. But I mean, we all knew that this sort of thing was going on in the analogue world. Now we're in the digital world of the same thing.
Did you ever bug flowers?
No, I never bugged flowers. No, I think that maybe it was a ladybird. I don't think it was.
Well, Derek Jameson said there would be bugs in there, and he was a News of the World editor all those years ago, and I don't think much has changed.
Thank you both very much indeed. This will. I'm assuming that this isn't the end of the story. I mean, this is going to roll and roll as this web gets wider and wider and wider. All sorts of shocking things that we'll find out.
Yeah, well, can I tell you a quick joke? I was in the back of a cab with the editor of The Guardian last night, and we were discussing exactly where Rebekah Brooks had come from, and I remember saying her main experience and her main talent was being able to wiggle her hips and wink at an ageing Australian.
Oh, come on, that's sexist.
See, that's unnecessary.
Can I tell you some other thing? The next year is 20 years since my little boy died, and I was sort of tabloid fodder for a very long time because of that. I recently, because I'm writing a piece for The Sun, would you believe, next week about the Cot Death campaign, I looked at the front page of The Sun for the day that my little boy died. Great big splashing tabloid headlines, as you can imagine, and the byline, Andy Coulson.
There we are.
Amazing.
Thank you both very much indeed.